If you worship a God who is a xenophobe, you have to justify xenophobia, you have to become xenophobic.
Yep.
If you worship a God who hates women so much that he considers menstruation to be disgusting and evil and they shouldn't be anywhere near the community when that's happening, well, you have to take on that misogynistic view as well. Christianity has presented the New Testament as if it's a continuation of the Old Testament. You know, you find them glued together with a hardcover either side of them that suggests it's all one book, all talking about the same thing, all talking about the same God.
I had a conversation with somebody recently where they were trying to argue with me that wherever Christianity popped up, women were like given a certain level of freedom and they rose up and they were like, I was like, really? I mean, when I look at history books, I'm not getting that information. I'm not seeing that anywhere.
I'm not sure I believe that. The one place you could go to for that would be the Salvation Army. The Salvation Army was a really interesting movement right at the beginning. I don't know how strong they are in the States, but I grew up very aware of William Booth and the Salvation Army in the UK. And they were a great force in terms of social welfare, but they were also very powerful evangelists back in the day. And they had women evangelists and leaders from the get-go.
Yeah.
But they only had it because they broke free from the religious mainstream, and they suffered a lot of persecution because of it.
A lot of women have been killed. A lot of women have suffered greatly in the earliest communities. There was a lot of oppression, and it was pretty bad. And you just, as you go through time, you discover even in the 3rd through 5th centuries, their women were still being oppressed in Christianity and in the Greco-Roman era. I mean, you just keep going and going. You had the burning of the female witches. We had we had the heresy movement. There were just so many things going on that were just mind-boggling. And I'm going, I don't know if that's 100% accurate. There may be times and maybe areas where women were giving a little bit of opportunity, but I mean, women were just able to vote, not too long ago. So, and it was, of course, as you know, in a lot of the biblical texts, they weren't even allowed inside the church at some time, in ancient times, but it's just a gradual process where you can see.
Yeah, I think women, you can see women being pushed out through the Bible in a number of different ways. I think when the female powerful being, the female Elohim Asherah, was sort of demonized and pushed out, that was not just defaming her. I think it really was defaming female wisdom. Traditionally, there's a lot of formation and initiation of young people in traditional cultures by women, and all of a sudden that gets demonized. The wise woman is now a problem. So, I mean, think of King Saul. Who do kings consult when they need higher wisdom? Saul wanted to consult a female who was known for having far sight and future sight. And we're allowed to know that, but we have to call her a witch. The Witch of Endor. You get into English church history, you get to the period of the Tudors. They were consulting wise women. They were consulting people way outside of the mainstream of Christian religion. But if a member of the public did that, that's when the call of witchcraft would get made. And this even happened to Princess Elizabeth before she became Queen Elizabeth I. She consulted with John Dee to find out how the succession would go. John Dee nearly lost his life because he did an astrological reading for Princess Elizabeth. Tudors are followed by King James, and I love telling people this who are sort of, the King James is the only Bible. I like telling them about King James because he was the most appalling person And there were things about that translation that were done in order to favor monarchy so as not to offend King James. And then King James decides he's going to become the Witchmaster General, and he is going to personally run this campaign of rounding up witches and then burning them. Bearing in mind, we're still in a period where kings and queens will consult astrologers and diviners and this, that, and the other. But if a member of the public does it, that's a crime. And if that person has done a consultation for someone I don't like, now they're a witch. Now we're going to burn them alive. And, you know, we talk about witch burnings. We need to remember what we're talking about is the burning of women. We really need to throw the word witch away. These were wise women who were consulted because they were wise, because they had understanding of sciences, anthropology, because they had an understanding of natural medicine. They were women. And this was done in the name of the church, in the name of Christianity, by the defender of the faith, King James himself. And there are so many injustices that have been done in the name of God because of the confusion, Billy, that we mentioned earlier. If you were going to read stories about violent, brutal, unforgiving, psychopathic Elohim and call them God's stories, you've got a problem. Because if you worship a God who is a xenophobe, you have to justify xenophobia, you have to become xenophobic. If you worship a God who hates women so much that he considers menstruation to be disgusting and evil and they shouldn't be anywhere near the community when that's happening, well, you have to take on that misogynistic view as well. I mean, what a stupid view that is. We all depend on, we all come from women. We all depend on the natural cycles of women. But because the being Yahweh hated adult human females to that extent, so those who worshipped him had to take that value on as well. And you really can draw a straight line from equating God with some of these Elohim and Yahweh stories, a straight line from that to all kinds of misogyny, colonialism, enslavement of other people groups, all kinds of cruelty, justified because this is what God does, and we're only doing God's work.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It really is unfortunate. This is a great talk, man. This is going to be a very powerful podcast because I can see now how it's going to really educate a lot of people. And I want people out there to make no mistake about it. We're not here bashing Christians. We're not attacking anybody. We're laying out actual factual information that you can then go back and research for yourself. And like I say, and Paul says, I think there's a lot of great information in the Bible. I think there's a lot of great information in other religious texts as well. It's just we're talking about today, we're talking about discernment. We're talking about understanding from different perspectives so you can gain a much broader view of everything. And it doesn't mean that your God doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that you've been, you wasted your life. It doesn't mean any of that. But what it does mean is, there's deeper, broader, more intriguing and incredible stories that we haven't really been able to see because we've been given a forced, closed view of what actually happened. And without that other deeper level of understanding, we might not get the better and bigger perspective of everything.
I think that's right. I think one of the things that distorted our view is that for the best part of 2,000 years, Christianity has presented the New Testament as if it's a continuation of the Old Testament. You find them glued together with a hardcover either side of them that suggests it's all one book, all talking about the same thing, all talking about the same God. And as a follower of Jesus, one thing I have had to do that's not really easy is to reframe that and understand, no, it's actually a story of discontinuity. All the gospel writers, and I think I'd say this is especially the canonical gospel writers, are at pains to present Jesus as the successor to and replacement of Moses, bringing teachings that will delete and replace the law and laws of Yahweh. That's a story of discontinuity. That's why Christianity has never been built on Yahweh's laws. That's why in Acts 15, the early church came to the agreement that to be a follower of Jesus, you don't have to be a Yahwist. That's why in Colossians, Paul said that the written code was cancelled and wiped out through the life and death of Jesus. And yet, Christians around the world still feel somehow they have to justify Yahweh, the figure of Yahweh and the stories around him and the laws he brought. But it is a story of discontinuity. And I think that has been a real light bulb for me. It's been really liberating. I think for me, it allowed me to switch my conscience back on when I read the Old Testament, because as you rightly say, Billy, it is full of violence, full of gratuitous violence done by these Elohim, including Yahweh. And as soon as you realize, okay, Jesus wasn't teaching us to follow Yahweh, you can begin to evaluate those stories. And if you evaluate those stories by Jesus's morality, then you can fully see that you're reading something appalling. There are many reasons we would want to get rid of the laws in the Old Testament. I mean, here's the death penalty. I just made some notes. Striking one's parents, death penalty. Pronouncing a curse over one's parents, death penalty. Going to an astrologer or doing divination, like we're just talking about, death penalty. Having a different religion, death penalty. Adultery, death penalty. Gay sex, death penalty. Well, I, for one, am very pleased that Jesus came along with teachings to delete and replace all of that, because I think that's terrible. What the Bible has to say about slavery or rape is absolutely terrible. There's a law in Deuteronomy 22 that says if a man rapes a virgin, he can offer the father 50 shekels and keep her. Well, what a fabulous law that is. Or Leviticus 25, when it comes to slavery, only foreigners can be slaves, it says. And you can leave slaves to your kids as property. Really? Oh, that's a great law, isn't it? And then that sort of overlaps with the behavior of the character of Yahweh himself, who was deep into sex slavery. If you go to Numbers 31, a place I'd encourage anyone to go and read, and you'll find the spoils of war being divided up, and the virgins are being divided up among this group and that group. The soldiers can keep some for their use, and Yahweh's going to have some for his use. And the priests are going to have some for their use. So don't think when Yahweh wants cattle and gold and virgin girls that it's talking about the priests having those things. That's a separate allotment in that list. Yahweh has his own list. So you should be asking a lot of questions there. I mean, this is not the creator of the universe. This is an entity. What does the entity want with those things? As you begin to read it this way, understand Yahweh is one of the Elohim, other things begin to make sense. You realize why in 1 Samuel 8, the leaders of the tribes of Israel did their level best to get rid of him and sack him and replace him with a human leader. It makes no sense. If Yahweh is the transcendent God, creator of the cosmos, it makes no sense at all. Soon as you bring it down to earth, realize that you're reading about Elohim / Anunnaki governing over human beings unjustly, brutally, everything clicks into place, and you will begin to understand what all the drama of the Old Testament is about. I actually think Christians should have a head start in this. I am not out there to debunk Christianity. I'm there to say, Christians, wake up, go back and read these stories in the light of Jesus' teaching, See the discontinuity between the old and the new. And if you're really not sure about it, I've got some verses from John 8 I'd love to read, because I think for me, this was a real wake-up moment. I'd always wondered about this passage, but because of the one Bible thing, Old and New Testament, because I thought it's the same God from cover to cover, I'd always puzzled around this. As soon as I realized its discontinuity, it makes sense. So here we are in John's Gospel, chapter 8, verse 27. It says, they did not know that what Jesus was speaking about was the Father. So this is a reminder that Jesus never once spoke the word Yahweh. He spoke about theos, that Greek word for God that Paul used and gave that wonderful definition for. He spoke about Father, the one in the heavens, he says. And he addresses that God as Abba, which means sir or daddy. So that's him in the canonical Gospels. And then Jesus is speaking in John 8, and he says, I speak of what I have seen of the Father. You do what you have heard from your father. So he's talking to Jewish leaders, and he's saying, my father's not the same as your father. So for a start, 8:41, you do the works of your father. Well, who's he talking about? Who's their father? Who can that possibly be if it isn't Yahweh? And then he says, verse 42, if theos, Greek word for God, if theos were your father, you would have loved me, because I came forth and have come from theos. There we are, an emanation of the source. Verse 44, you are of your father, the devil, and you are intent on doing the desires of your father. Now, when he says the devil, that doesn't necessarily mean there's only one devil and that their father is it. But the devil is certainly not a compliment.
No.
You are of your father, the devil, and you are intent on doing the desires of your father. He was a murderer from the beginning. Well, we've just been talking about that, all the killings that Yahweh does and orders people to do, not just soldiers, but civilians, not just men, but women and children and babies. We're talking about war crimes, to use the modern language for it. He was a murderer from the beginning. He didn't stand in or hold to or deal with truth, because there is no truth in him. When he lies, that is his thing, because he is a liar and the father of lies, or it can mean a false father. You claim that my father is your God, i.e. Yahweh, but you do not know my father. I do. So he's proclaiming something completely new, very different to the father of the Jewish leaders, and it's new to his disciples as well. So later in John's Gospel, Philip says, Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us. And Jesus says, well, I've been with you so long, Philip, and yet you do not know me. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And we're back to that emanation of the source. And I'll just finish with another reference, because, again, it was a light bulb moment for me when I saw it. Once I understood there's this discontinuity going on, there's this cessation of the laws of Yahweh, and Jesus is bringing something totally new and liberating. He says, and this comes up in Matthew's Gospel and Luke's Gospel, he says, which of you fathers, if your children were hungry and thirsty, would give them a stone or give them a snake? And many readers today would read that and say, well, that's ridiculous. Of course, what kind of father would do that? But not realize that the Jewish hearers would know straight away, oh, I can think of someone who did that. That was in fact Yahweh, who gave a stone when people were thirsty, who gave serpents to people who were hungry and anxious in the desert. Serpents can mean dragons. fiery serpents, which went and attacked the people. Again, men, women, children, babies, attacked by snakes because they were desperate and fed up of emergency rations in the desert. Here's a stone, I'll show you how to get water. Here's snakes. So that would have been the bells ringing when Jesus said, what kind of father does that to hungry children?
Yeah.
And then in that original story where they've all been bitten by snakes, a brass dragon is created and lifted up, and the order from Moses is kowtow. Kowtow to the dragon. Bow down to the dragon or you'll die. And I have a Bible behind me where the heading over that story is Yahweh's mercy. Well, if that's Yahweh's mercy, what does his wrath look like?
Wow.
And that's why Jesus came, to cancel the law and laws of Yahweh and replace it with something else. That's why it was canceled, wiped out, according to Colossians 2:14. That's why we shouldn't regard those stories as having any purpose other than bringing people to Jesus. That's what Paul says in the book of Galatians. And that's why so many teachings are framed in the Gospels when Jesus says, you've heard it said, Moses said, but I say this. And there is the story of discontinuity. So Christians, I think, ought to have a head start and go back to the stories and say, well, if these are not stories about God, what are they about? And my book, The Eden Conspiracy, asks that question and says there is a rich education waiting for us. The Bible is full of truth. I'm not here to debunk the Bible. The Bible is full of truth, but we've misunderstood it, we've mistranslated it. And once we get beyond our habitual religious, habitual translations, there's a rich education waiting for us to empower us in our lives today.